Good afternoon. It's a little bit after 3:30, so we will go ahead and get started. So welcome to the Communication Research Center's Fall 2024 Dr. Melvin L. DeFleur Distinguished Lecture. My name is Michelle Amazine. I'm the Director of the CRC and Associate Dean of Research at the College of Communication. I'd like to extend a special welcome to those of you who are visiting from other colleges within the BU community, as well as if you are visiting from a university in the local Boston area. We're glad to have you join us here. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items to go over. First, could you please silence your phones, laptops, anything that beeps, so as not to distract your neighbors or to interfere with the recording that we're doing today. And if you are a comm student wishing to earn SONA credit, we're asking you to be sure that you've checked in with your BU ID with the folks out front. I'll do another reminder at the end of this talk. I know there's a long line of people waiting to come in, which is great. I'd also like to take a moment to thank our CRC staff. Amanda King is wandering around somewhere. She's our research manager, along with our graduate assistants, Violet Lee, I see over there, and Delana Rodolitz. Thank you very much to all of you. You've made this lecture series possible. And after today's lecture, I want to invite all of you to come upstairs to COM 209. We're going to have free food and refreshments and the opportunity for you to talk with our guest of honor one-on-one. So this lecture series, the DeFleur Lecture, began in the fall of 2009. We're in our 15th year of doing this. It's named in honor of the pioneering communications scholar, Dr. Melvin L. DeFleur, who was our colleague here at the College of Communication for 10 years. Today, I'm delighted to introduce our distinguished speaker, Dr. Bartosz W. Wojdynski. Dr. Wojdynski is the Jim Kennedy New Media Professor in the Department of Journalism at the University of Georgia, where he has directed the Digital Media Attention and Cognition Lab since 2014. He received his PhD in Mass Communication from the University of North Carolina. As a behavioral social scientist, Dr. Wojdynski's research examines how the design of digital messages shapes understanding, persuasion, and behavior, with a focus on the mediating role of attention. I've had the pleasure of collaborating with Dr. Wojdynski on a number of occasions, and I've learned so much, which is why I'm so happy that he's here today to share his wealth of knowledge with all of you. Today, Dr. Wojdynski is here to present some of his ongoing research in a talk entitled Seeing is Not Believing, Deepfakes, AI Images, and the Psychology of Detection. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Bart Wojdynski.
So I'll try to make sure I talk into the mic. Let me know if any of you in the back have a hard time hearing me. I can always adjust. But also, I don't really like just talking at people for 45 minutes. So the way you can help me out with that is if you guys have a question while I'm talking, please go ahead and raise your hand. I'd rather sort of break it up a little bit. I mean, don't get carried away, but I think that would be doing me a public service. So especially if there's something you don't understand, or need any help with, or you're wondering why I did something, or there's something unexplainable on my slide, I'm happy to talk about it at any kind of given point.
So we've been asked to stall for a little bit because there's a long line of people coming in. And if we could ask those of you who are sitting on the ends, maybe if you could move into the middle so that we can make room for the people who are coming in.
Pop in and would like to come in.
See? Demand. No, I think there's more than that. There's plenty of room at the front too. There's open seats up here.
You could do that.
There's a line all the way down.
I don't, they're capturing on Zoom anyway, so yeah.
Thank you. It's just a design.
Plenty of seats up front here. We're going to get started. And just a reminder, if you are here for credit, we're going to remind you at the end to check in with our staff up front for Sona credit. So without further ado, let me turn it back over to Dr. Wojdynski.
All right, hey everybody, welcome. So as promised on the slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about deepfakes. In this case, I'm going to use the term kind of broadly to encompass both photorealistic images and photorealistic video, just kind of based on the technologies that produce them. And mainly I want to talk about some research we've been doing pretty recent. So everything I presented to you guys is stuff we have not published yet. Some of this is data we collected this July. Some of it was data we're still analyzing that gets at the human side of how people respond to these things, how they think about them, and what kind of factors underlie people's perceptions of whether they figure out if an image is synthetic or if it's real, and how they kind of make those decisions. I'm happy to start off talking a little bit about the broader social context. I'm not the expert on all the social and individual and psychological problems deepfakes can pose, but we can easily come up with some of them because we've already seen them applied in some of these contexts, from cyber warfare to all kinds of election interference to various misinformation, disinformation campaigns in domains of health or climate, or even more sort of small time news stuff, just kind of reputation management issues, right? So like I said, we're talking about basically anything, the technologies that we kind of use now to create fake but believable content and thus mislead humans. So software programs that allow us to synthesize audio, synthesize voices. They allow us to synthesize images. They allow us to synthesize video, different kind of combinations of these things. But largely, we're talking about large language models that are trained on realistic images and then can be used to create obviously highly real images like this Taylor Swift here with her very authentic Patriots jersey and not the Pidrids. So some things you can get right, some things you can get wrong. On my second slide, I really asked it to generate Noah Khan eating a corn dog. And I'm not sure that exactly is what a corn dog is. And maybe it's different up north than where I live, but not that even looks like Noah Khan, but that's a separate issue, right? So the kind of one of the other domains of problems posed by these technologies, right? It's this idea of like an erosion of trust, right? Having these technologies broadly available, a lot of them are open source, right? Anyone can use them, create situations in which anyone who has some maybe legitimate incriminating visual evidence can say, that's a deep fake. You don't know if it's real, but they probably made that up, right? So that's part of the issue here, and happens within the context of the backdrop of a larger global erosion of trust in digital media in general, right? So maybe we all just kind of, one way forward is we all become nihilistic and it's like, oh, well, we can't believe anything we see. Why should I believe anything unless I've experienced it myself? So that's kind of a context here too, right? All right. So deepfakes, we're talking about fake AI-generated images, videos, audio, sometimes there's text included, typically generated using deep learning approaches. With the images, they're often using generative adversarial networks. So if that just sort of sounds like tech gobbledygook, the shorthand version of this is imagine one computer trying to beat another computer. So you have a computer that's creating fake images and another computer that's trained to detect them. And then the first one gets the feedback from the second one and figures out how to make its images better so they can't detect it. And they kind of keep going back and forth. But that's kind of what's fueled this rapid evolution of this technology, right? Is now that we can basically have these two computers fighting over making the images more or less undetectable, then we can create things that get where the realism kind of doubles over a span of 9 months, right? So there's a lot of generation tools available, both commercial and open source. This is a picture we generated using Stable Diffusion. There's the URL right there. Increasingly, you've got tools in the same software programs you might be using for class, right? I don't know if you guys have played around with Adobe Firefly on the web, or even some of the beta Adobe tools in Illustrator, in Photoshop. I think Premiere also has some AI generative video editing, video fill techniques in there now too. So the software is not going away. It's only just becoming more ubiquitous and available to us in more places. These are some of the kinds of programs that people use to generate realistic images, and that's not even including all of the kind of face swap stuff, right? You can very easily, as opposed to just like photoshopping someone's face and sticking it on image, now we have again, AI generated software that makes that face swapping much more realistic. So now you imagine you have a generative AI image tool, you have a face swap tool. Using both of them in about 3 minutes, you can create not just something that's very hyper realistic, but you can swap in someone who may not even have like this broad base of images available of them that the library has been trained on, right? If I ask Stable Diffusion or Midjourney to do a picture of Kamala Harris, they've seen enough pictures of Kamala Harris that they can get a realistic one. If I give them your name, okay, maybe they haven't seen you, right? But I can generate a picture of someone that looks like you, swap your face in, and all of a sudden, I come away with essentially the same thing as if it could have drawn a picture of you in the first place. So when we talk about uses, I'm not here to sort of say this technology is purely evil, right? There are benign uses, certainly in the entertainment industry and gaming industry. I taught a deepfake seminar at UGA this past spring, and I had all the students kind of do presentations on deepfakes they found in the wild. And someone found this like awesome clip of essentially it's Arnold Schwarzenegger singing as Dorothy singing Over the Rainbow, like in black and white. But like the face swap is so good, and the voice synthesis is so good. It's got like, if you ever picture what like Dorothy would sound like with a husky Austrian accent, it's perfect. So, I mean, that's amusing. Who doesn't like that, right? More recently, this is the movie here. This is Robert Zemeckis movie, right? With Tom Hanks and Robin Wright. And this is like a movie that just came out, and that's Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, but that's not actually really what they look like now, right? So they've used technology, because the movie is sort of all set in the same spot. It's actually all shot from a camera in the exact same spot over long periods. It's spanning long periods in the movie's plot, like I think there's even scenes of like dinosaur days or whatever. But they also wanted to de-age the main characters. So they de-age them like, I don't know, 40 years, 50 years, just kind of using generative AI technology. So they actually had to play younger versions of themselves. I think they probably also used some voice synthesis techniques too, or voice editing techniques to kind of catch that. It's okay, that's not really nefarious. We also know there's a lot of malicious uses, right? So we talked about sort of political misinfo context. There's also this broad world of like non-consensual nude and sexual images, right? That not just their existence of them is problematic, but then can be used for blackmail and lots of other things. So lots of things that can, affect famous people, but also not famous people, right? Someone just wants to have play out a revenge fantasy, and now they have these tools at their disposal. In addition to that, identity theft issues, corporate fraud, lots of other things. We had another student kind of pull up some example of someone that used a video face swap thing to con their employer out of $500,000. I mean, it's pretty impressive work, but also sort of points out how this kind of stuff can happen. Okay, so that's the problem. What are things that people are doing about it? One domain of potential solutions, right, is if we already have technology that can recognize deepfakes and help improve the generation of deepfakes, maybe we can have some consumer-facing technology that we can use to detect some of this stuff. And there's a lot of sites out there that now you can upload an image and it'll give you some sort of scan, give you some kind of probability based on its algorithm that maybe the image as a whole has been manipulated or is fake. Or some of them might even give you little hotspots where it says this part of the image we feel like has had something done to it. So again, this software is also going to improve really rapidly. But as of right now, it's got a lot of both false positives and false negatives. And that's one thing they're still working on, right? So there's this kind of asymmetry where malicious actors can pretty quickly generate these deepfakes, but we're still working on technological solutions to help us spot them, weed them out, maybe not weed them out, but just flag them, put something on the image so that people know. There's also digital watermarking technologies that certain companies are using. There are a few other kind of solutions. A couple other areas where people are working for solutions. One is what we call digital content provenance attestation, which is awful words to say, and then you come up with this snazzier name for it. But essentially, you can almost think of it as like a chain of custody for timestamping when the image was created, how many times it's been edited, so that certain programs and certain cameras, although at this day and age right now, in November of 2024, certain cameras means one camera and it's a $20,000 camera, embed the right kind of metadata in these image files that then can be sort of read by certain metadata readers. Are hard to tamper with, but again, people can probably find out ways around it. But so that you sort of get a record. This is an example of a Google Chrome plugin that does tell you some things, and it's only looking for sort of official signatures from official programs in which the image was created or edited. Adobe is on board with this content credentialing standard. So if you generate an image in any of their products that have AI stuff in it, it does this content credentialing and sort of said this was generated on this date in Adobe Firefly, et cetera. So there's some stuff out there, both on the software creating digital signatures and on the camera hardware creating digital signatures. But not only is it still not great, we actually know nothing about how real people would respond to this information, whether they'd even access it. If they were able to access it, how would they interpret it? And how we can actually put it in their hands when they encounter these images, right? Is a browser plug in the right way? Would a social media platform need to build it into their operating system? We've sort of got to figure that out, right? So user perceptions, right? There's also very little known to date. I mean, some people have done a little bit of research on ChatGPT and sort of social conversations, but not that much we know. This is where I'm trying to contribute to the literature about how real people actually perceive, categorize this content, how often they notice whether it's, or form an opinion of whether it's been synthetically generated, how often they care, what would be an effective way of communicating some of these results to them. So all of these are kind of challenges to us as people trying to build better systems and trying to understand a little bit about user psychology. Now, generative AI has its own challenges. I asked AI to generate a picture of someone eating a s'more, and it clearly, much like a corn dog, it doesn't really know what a s'more is supposed to look like. I think somewhere in there, it's got at least two of the component parts are a marshmallow, and I mean, I don't even think it really knows what a graham cracker looks like. Those look more like waffles. But anyway, that's one of the problems it has. In the meantime, we kind of deal with sort of the broader social problems as well, right? One of these is what we call AI slop. Y'all look like a relatively young crowd. Does any two or three of y'all maybe ever use Facebook? Anyone use Facebook? Okay, it's about two or three. That's what I thought. I appreciate you guys repping for the olds. But Facebook in particular, although lots of other social media platforms too, has had a proliferation of Facebook groups that I don't think are started by anyone other than content trollers to just post a bunch of like fake stuff and pretend it's real. You can find like plant specific AI slop groups. You can find food cooking specific AI slop groups. But you also find cases that people are using this for like news misinfo, other stuff like that. You can generate political cartoons that, you know, maybe do okay with images and still kind of struggle with the words a little bit, right? Although maybe that's like, and that could be like a good like punk rock band name. I don't know. But there's a lot of this stuff like, oh, you won't believe this photo I took. Well, yeah, I don't believe you took it. So that's kind of like another general content problem. And then this problem of dismissal of truth. So this actually came up. This is just the other week. A journalist took this actually spectacular picture. David Ramos of Getty Images took this picture of flooding in Spain. There's like a 70-car pile up caused by flooding. And then several different people, I think including some elected officials, said like, well, no, that's just a deep fake. This is actually not a deep fake, and he could, verify it in certain ways. You can go to Street View and actually find the storefronts and see this is like a real street and not just AI generated text. But it's just an example of the kind of thing we're going to see happening. If someone has a case to make for why they don't want that thing to be true, and you're showing them photographic evidence, let's say your photographic evidence really isn't there. All right, so the stuff I want to talk about fills in this research gap. So as of right now, we know pretty little about how people actually process this stuff, right? First of all, the technology is evolving really rapidly. And secondly, people just haven't had a chance to really get familiar with a lot of the software and stuff behind it. So it's important because we generally have this idea that if you see something, it's true, right? It even has a name, truth default theory. And this tends to be heightened when we talk about visual images and not just text, right? Text requires several extra steps to sort of reach our brain and mean something, whereas images we can inform perceptions of, even if there's some kind of language barrier, we can form it faster. People remember images longer and with greater accuracy than sort of specific words they've seen. Casual skimmers, I don't know if y'all ever casually skim content on your phones, but also tend to remember images longer than text. So there's lots of kind of reasons that we think the image space in particular in AI is different than just sort of like what kind of problems are posed by ChatGPT, right? So some of the research I'm going to talk to y'all comes out of a grant that I'm working on with faculty in a couple of different disciplines, and this has been sort of the cool part about it is I'm sort of here on the media psychology side doing all the human subjects work. We have a couple of folks in computer science that are actually working on trying to build a better version of that Google Chrome plugin. And then we have a couple of folks in law actually trying to look at what regulatory frameworks can be built to address some of the challenges posed by deepfakes. So my stuff kind of fits in here. And this is kind of my research agenda for, let's say, this year and the first half of next year, is looking at human perception of deepfakes, human perception of deepfake detection results, and human perception of provenance verification results, like chain of custody stuff. All right. So let's talk about this a little bit. So we did some research this summer where we're trying to figure out basically how people decide if they think photorealistic images are real or AI generated. That's the title. These are sort of the questions that we were kind of factoring in there. One, sort of like how accurately do people recognize AI generated and photorealistic images? Second, what's the relationship between their confidence that, yeah, I think I've classified this one correctly, and their actual correctness? Like any confidence study, it's not very high. The people who are more confident tend to be more wrong. What decision rules do people use to decide? And what areas of the image do people view the most when they're making these decisions? So this is kind of the research study we did. We end up showing people 40 images, and those 40 images each fit into one of 4 buckets. So 20 of the images we showed them were real, 20 of the images we showed them were fake. Within that 20, half of them were what we called face images, basically roughly something that's either like a total headshot or like a torso upshot, but something with one person in it where you're looking at their face. And then the other half of the images were what we called scenes, which was basically anything else. So you might have a crowd shot, you might have a shot with multiple people sort of in like mid-range, you might have a shot with no people, just some other objects, and all those things were kind of classified as scenes. So in this study, we showed everybody that came in saw 40 images, they saw them in a random order, but everybody saw 10 real faces, 10 fake faces, 10 real scenes, 10 fake scenes. And after they looked at each one, we let them look at it for as long as they wanted to. We had them answer 2 questions about it. One, just like a dichotomous classification. Do you think this is real or do you think this is synthetic? Like AI or real was basically the thing they could choose. Choose a button for each. Secondly, okay, how confident are you in your judgment 1 to 7? We recruited from the general population. Mean age was about 39. Our sample was a little overly female, a little overly white, and very overly educated because we're in a college town in the summer. So that no real way around it. Like 60% of our participants had a college degree and like 30% had a grad degree. But those are the people that wanted to come to our lab and view AI images. It was the best we could do. So they viewed the images in a randomly presented order. While they viewed each image, their gaze was recorded by an eye tracker. And then after viewing each image, they were asked those 2 questions that I told you all about, right? This is actually the desk at which we did it. Although those aren't real participants, that's just me and the study team, sort of looking at it. And then, so that the viewing and answering questions was really our part A. For part B, we played back the recording that we had of them looking at the images. So basically, what they saw on the screen plus the eye tracking data superimposed on top of the screen. And we asked them to just tell us out loud. We had a microphone, and so we're recording audio. Tell us out loud what characteristics of the image made you come to that decision. Like, why did you think that was real or fake? And so that's kind of our richest trove of data because we had 60 people each talking about 40 images and sort of what decision rules they used. And so some of the results I want to present to you are in progress, where we're trying to really identify and see how often people use specific decision heuristics to kind of make these decisions. How do we make our images? We use several freely available tools, Stable Diffusion, StyleGAN, or we specifically use how many of y'all have used the site This Person Does Not Exist? Anybody? Okay, 1 person. So first of all, a couple folks. First of all, that's the site, like thispersondoesnotexist.com. And every time you load it, it just generates a new face for you. And that's pretty much all it does. Secondly, I know there's a bunch of spin-off sites that the original people and other people have done. Like you can generate fake dogs, generate fake restaurants, whatever. But we stuck with the original. And so we used that. We used Midjourney a little bit. Some of the Midjourney stuff was too cartoony. We used Microsoft Bing's AI engine, was pretty good. I think those are the main ones, but really I let my research team use any tool at their disposal, as long as we could know it was fake because we created it ourselves. For the real images, we just harvested them from places that we knew had real images. We took a few of them, or we used stuff we had taken in the past. We used some images friends had taken, but we could verify that all of them were real. Let me show you, so on the next couple of slides, I'm gonna show you guys some examples. And I put a number up next to each one. These are just from the face set. So I want you to keep in your mind, let's say the ones you think are fake. So just the numbers are 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, and we can talk about it a little bit later. All right, so I'll show you the first one now. I'll give you guys like 10 seconds on each one. Okay, interesting, cool. Look at I like the degree of confidence here. Oh, I see a mixture. This is the first time I really heard disagreement. I like that. I'm not like really into conflict, but I'm glad we had some disagreement. All right. So of the images I showed you, one of them is real. And it's this one. This is my friend's daughter. So I used her picture in it. That one is real. All 4 of these other ones are fake. Now, okay, this one seemed to have the most universal agreement. So somebody tell me, oops, there goes the mic. Someone tell me why you thought this one was fake. Okay, so the background is blurry and her face is smoothed out. What did you say, sir? Too pretty. Oh, too pretty. I mean, there's pretty people in this room. I mean, I'm not saying she's not pretty, but there's real pretty people. They exist.
There's no switch on that light switch.
Yeah, what even is that, right? It looks like a weird outlet with like 4 long rectangles. But that's savvy, right? You had to look beyond the foreground and go all the way to the background. All right. So, I mean, there are a couple of things, right? And the fact that some of y'all mentioned sort of her skin tone, it's a little too perfect. She looks a little airbrushed. But you're not alone in this, right? A lot of us use this heuristic. But that same idea, when you see a picture of someone whose face isn't perfect or airbrushed, you're like, oh, well, that's probably real then, because this one doesn't look like someone's professionally retouched it. But this one, actually, a couple of these are from This Person Does Not Exist, right? This one also. Now, again, one of the things this particular software does is it sometimes likes to generate like artifacts on the side that are like partial faces. This one is completely plausible. You just don't see it, but sometimes those end up really misshapen, even if the original one is perfect. But anyway, so let me tell you what happened in our study, right? So in our study, we're still analyzing the data, but here's what we know so far. So in general, our scene pictures, and I haven't really shown you many of those. I'll show you a couple. Overall, people correctly classified the AI ones as actually being AI at 78%, right? That's like, almost 4 out of 5 times people got that right. So that's pretty good. And then the real scenes, again, pictures we had taken, landscape shots, a group of people out on a street, a picture of some water at the beach, whatever it was. People did a pretty good job too, right? 74%, about 3 out of 4. So it's like pretty even. People are doing a good job there with the scenes. The most correctly classified scene was this one. This is like by far our most cartoony looking AI generated image. Talk about uncanny valley. The dog's a little like melting. The sidewalk's not even straight. Her face is a little also not realistic. The texture of her sweater or jacket or whatever, something between a sweater and a jacket is also not really working. I'm not sure what's going on with her skirt. There's lots of different things you can sort of point at as tells in this one. All right. But again, same software we used to generate this one, generated this one, which was our most incorrectly classified. Now, like, okay, maybe that's like a bit of an awkward kiss. Like they're not really, it seems a little dispassionate, like they're just bumping into each other. But other than that, a number of details are there. I know it's a little harder to see on the screen. The first thing people look for, right, is often the hands. The hands are a little clunky. It's kind of hard to tell with this light, but there's you could imagine there's the right number of digits there. But anyway, 42% of people got that this was correctly AI. The rest of them thought it was not. They got the right kind of like sharpness in the foreground, blurriness in the background, no immediately weird artifacts in the background, etc. Most incorrectly classified. This is a real photograph. I don't know if people were just like suspicious because we didn't show them any faces. They're like, AI could generate that. But only 66% of people got that one correct. So that's how it went on the scenes. So again, in the 70s, right? About 70-something% of people got it right, whether it was real or AI. Then we get to the faces. Again, real faces, people did pretty well. Overall accuracy rate of 76%. You got to feel like at this point in the game, we feel pretty good with that. If 3 out of 4 times people get it right, that's at least slightly comforting. The AI generated faces, though, y'all. I mean, 53%. Probably you could flip a quarter 100 times, and you very likely might end up at 53%, right? That's basically a coin flip. So the answer is so this is the wrong percentages on it. I will fix that. The answer is that people have a really hard time correctly classifying AI generated images. This is supposed to say 98%. Was this one? I don't know how we ended up with 33%. Apologize for that. And this was the most incorrectly classified. Only 51% of people got this right. This was a real image. They actually thought it was a fake image. Now, why do you think people thought this was a fake image? I think the background's part of it. A lot of people mention the hat, right? They're like, well, his hat looks a little lopsided. Turns out sometimes, like, people, you take a picture, people's hats look a little lopsided. But anyway, so that was like the thing people mentioned most frequently, but it didn't actually, in this case, lead them to the correct classification. So we want to look at a couple of other things. So one of the things we want to look at is, are there individual differences between people that can increase the likelihood that they're going to classify certain types of images correctly? And so the two things we thought maybe could matter is, one, maybe familiarity with AI or AI-generated visuals, which is kind of like general how these AI software libraries work, right? These large language models. And secondly, was just familiarity with digital images, right? We're having everybody look at digital photographs, real and fake ones. Maybe if you know more about it, you can spot more things. I don't think we use the best measures for these, but we use the best things I could find. Doing this study made me want to build better measures. So if anyone wants to work on a scale development study for AI literacy, I'm with you, because that's actually one of my next projects. But I used stuff that people had already created. Anyway, so what did that actually lead to? So AI literacy if you can think of these numbers are all bivariate Pearson correlation. So they go from like 0 means like there's no relationship. 1,000 means like you can predict something exactly by knowing the other thing, right? So if by knowing someone's AI literacy score, you could predict exactly 100% of their classifications, that would be 1,000. Well, so turns out AI literacy actually really helps people classify AI scenes, but not the AI faces, and also helps them classify real faces, but not the real scenes. Don't know why, but that's kind of how it worked out. Digital image literacy, on the other hand, mainly just helps with AI scenes. Right? So the place where we see the asterisk is where there's like actually a strong relationship. So it does make a difference, but it only makes a difference with certain kinds of content. And you know, I think AI literacy carries a little bit more weight than the image literacy, but again, some of that might just kind of be the weakness of the measures that we have. So then the main thing we wanted to know is on what basis people made these classification decisions, right? So we had each member of our research team take a sample of these responses, right? We had 60 people and 40 images. So imagine we had like 2,400 sort of individual explanations for why someone thought something was real or fake. We took a sample of them and analyzed them to kind of see, are there things that are coming up multiple times? Sort of these, you know, there are people's own theories that they hold about like how I can judge what's real from what's true. And after kind of several iterations and getting together and discussing these, we've come up with a taxonomy of 9 decision heuristics. So I'm going to present these to you guys, but keep in mind that this is what people do. It's not necessarily this helps them or do it well, right? Some of these are rules people apply that help them consistently make the wrong decision. It's also true. Decision heuristic. You might know some of these because you apply them yourself. Fingers and hands, right? Fingers and hands look off, they're knobby, they're in unnatural positions, they're just like 7 digits on one extremity, all of this kind of stuff. That's a big one. If there are hands in the picture, people are going to look at it. That's always like an easy, low-hanging fruit that people look at. Words and logos. So if the picture being generated is something that includes some words on it, that's something that people really relied on. But again, as you guys saw with the Taylor Swift image I made, right? They got the word. I said like have her holding a sign that says "I love Boston University." All those words came out really right on the sign. Sorry to break your heart if you really thought that was Taylor. But the stuff like they couldn't get. She was wearing a Patriots jersey, but it couldn't get that word right. So again, especially like in street scenes where there's buildings, there's street signs, there's always something that would be a tell with a word or some kind of logo. That was one place people looked at a lot, right? Lighting. So you're trying to see if like the lighting is consistent across the picture. If some object here looks like the light's coming at it from a different side than another object. Shadows. I know that kind of sounds like lighting, but sometimes people are sort of explicitly looking for like the shadow of this object is in the wrong place vis-a-vis the object. And so that we sort of decided that's a separate decision rule. Facial perfection and imperfection. Now this works all kinds of different ways. The face is too smooth, too perfect, too artificial looking. You know, people see any kind of wrinkles or oiliness or skin pigmentation or, you know, something else that's not smooth across the face and they think it makes it appear real, obviously sometimes to lead them to the wrong decision. Asymmetry in facial features or accessories. One thing that's specifically a problem with this person does not exist is like it'll give somebody one earring on one ear and like a different earring on the other ear or no earring on the other ear, something like that, right? Image sharpness. We've already talked about that a little bit. AI repeats patterns, elements, sometimes like specific objects. Okay, we've got a picnic scene, a family out at having a Memorial Day picnic. Why are there 7 bowls of mac and cheese when there's only like 9 dishes on the table, right? So we definitely had a few things like that. But the biggest thing that people use, especially for real objects, is sort of like, that looks like a normal, whatever it's supposed to look like. I show a picture of a guy standing in a kitchen. So I'm like, yeah, that looks like a normal kitchen. I think it's a real picture, right? So that's ultimately kind of what we all resort to, is a little bit of a gut feeling of this matches my pre-existing schema for what I think this object is going to look like. So we're still in the process of coding like all the remainder of participant responses. We've got 3 coders doing it. The main idea is we want to see like for every judgment, which of those rules people are using. We want to figure out like which rules are used the most frequently and which, you know, and so on, like a hierarchy of how frequently they're used. But most importantly, we want to figure out like which rules are more likely to lead to correct judgments as opposed to incorrect ones, right? Which that's the biggest thing here, is to correlate that stuff. I wish we had that coding done, but my student RAs or people too, I'm a person too, we're like all behind on where we thought we would be. But I can show y'all, I wanted to play y'all just a little clip of what this this kind of playback looked like. I think I'll get this sound up here. So this was one person's experience going through here, maybe.
Tell you what was going through my brain. Yeah. Yeah. This, I feel like with faces, like sometimes I feel like there are tells, like the eyes look a little weird or something, and like she didn't look weird to me. But the necklace was the thing. I was like, okay, no, it made a name, Skylar, versus like a weird squiggle. So that was how I decided on that one.
Anyway, so that's kind of the process. You can imagine what it would sound like if you were in the participant's shoes and what sort of decision rules you would use as well. But that's kind of where we are on that one. So in terms of what we know so far, right? One, AI generated faces that don't look airbrushed are hard to detect. It's really easy to spot the that's too perfect ones. It's pretty hard to spot the that's imperfect. We know that participants have their own set of lay theories about how to tell if real from fake images. These definitely differ, right? Just because I say something was a common decision rule doesn't mean that everybody used it or that everybody used it the same way. Some people are looking for very different things than other people. And I fully understand that as a researcher, like sometimes people just had a gut feeling and now they're trying to like back explain it to me, and that's probably fine too, right? A lot of times, especially when we see an image that represents the real world, like we have to make a kind of gut decision, and that's kind of the Gestalt approach that a lot of people are taking here, right? These theories include decision rules that prove an image is true, as well as proving that an image is fake, right? So we have a lot of things like, okay, 6 fingers, that's probably fake. Few people exceptions, but most of the time people don't have 6 fingers. But someone's like, that's definitely real because like, look at that stand. AI can't do that, right? Or that's definitely real because like, look at the reflection in the glass. So again, sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. I'm just documenting what they're doing. But these rules can often lead to incorrect conclusions. Ultimately, the most common thing we've seen anecdotally, without being able to quantify it, is this idea of like, that's too perfect. This is imperfect. So if you're trying to make a good, like modify your deceptive image software, just add some imperfections in there. And that'll probably work in your favor. And these rules are sort of based on people's expectations of what the technology can and can't do. And that's always a shifting ground, right? The technology is changing as we go through it. It also matters what the technology is trained on. So these are all from This Person Does Not Exist. It's trained on like a data set of Flickr portraits, mainly from the 2000s. So that's fine, and it generates pretty realistic things. But one of the things I put in our data set is a real Flickr picture my wife's roommate took in the mid-2000s, and lo and behold, it looks just like the kind of fake stuff generated from it, right? The technology is only as good as what people feed into it, and that's that's why certain things might look a certain way, but that also kind of makes it easy to fake. I want to talk a little bit about a slightly different study we did because this one involves video deepfakes. Not necessarily getting at some of the same questions, but just sort of another way to go about looking at some of these issues. So this study was led by a student in my lab named Jian Yun, and she was really interested. She had a couple of things that drove her to do this, but she was really interested in sort of deepfake videos that are providing misinformation about like concrete issues that aren't necessarily like related to a specific celebrity or related to a specific election, but about general health, climate, sort of the way we understand the world around us. And she had some ideas about like what kind of individual beliefs might make people more susceptible to them. So we measured some of that stuff. But the bulk of the study was sort of trying to figure out how well people discern deepfake videos, and if it matters whether the video is coming from a celebrity or an ordinary person. So we had 4 different conditions in our study. The video was either real or fake, and it was either from a celebrity or an ordinary person. We went with the same script. So we started with a clip of Morgan Freeman on The View. He was promoting an environmental documentary that he produced as well as narrated. But it was a clip of him basically talking about climate change, a specific clip we used. He wasn't talking about the movie, he was just talking about the science. Then we created a deepfake. Now for this one, and for some reason we got lucky that we did it this way, but we don't want to put words in Morgan Freeman's mouth. I'm not in that kind of business of creating fake stuff. So we basically created a fake version of him saying the thing he actually said. So we synthesized his voice using Jammable. Used to be something used to be called Voicify, but like a synthetic voice generator, and had it read from the same script, like the script of what Morgan Freeman said on the show. And then we used sync to actually kind of synchronize the mouth movements that like the same way a lot of deepfake videos use, right? So basically, we've created a deepfake version of the original video. It's just the fake version, fake voice, fake mouth. Then we got an ordinary person, right? We found this voice actor who was willing to do this for us for like a little bit of money, and he did more like a TikTok style kind of video, but reading the same script. So the words were the same. We hired him to do this, and then we deepfaked him. So we used the same exact software tools, Jammable and Sync, and kind of created it. I'm not going to show you guys all these, but we can start with the Morgan Freeman deepfake, I guess. That would be like some low-hanging fruit. Oops. Maybe I should. Second here. All right. Well, it was a pretty short, like 40-second clip, and basically it looked a little janky. If you really want to know, right? You looking at it could probably figure out it was a deep fake. But anyway, we wanted to know what the general public thought. So we did this as an online experiment. Again, we recruited sort of from the population of U.S. adults. You can kind of set the gender to be basically even split on prolific. So we did that. Again, ended up with a mean age of about 39. And we asked people to view the entire video. It wasn't very long. And then answer some questions. So these are the main things we were interested in measuring credibility. So in terms of what the messages of the video. Was it believable? Was it authentic? Was it credible? Authenticity. So this is a scale that GM found that basically used 3 items to measure how well the visuals represented reality and were realistic. That you may have seen something fake. We just kind of want to know, like, how authentic did it look to you? And then we measured counter arguing. But she was also interested in, like, people would sort of think of counter arguments, the information being presented differently based on the kind of video they saw and who was speaking. So here we found there's a main effect of speaker type on message credibility, where people sort of thought the celebrity video was more credible than the ordinary person. Again, this kind of makes sense in this context. This is not Morgan Freeman's first foray into environments. It's not like he's like a rando celeb that happened to be making a documentary. Ordinary, fine, kind of expected. There was a main effect of speaker type on counter arguments. Counter argued less with the celebrity video than the ordinary person, right? It makes sense. If you think a message is more credible, you're not going to like counter argue it. But if you think it's just like a random person, you might counter argue it more. Also, maybe somewhat unsurprising, people thought the deepfake video visuals were less authentic than the regular video visuals. Again, it's almost like a manipulation check, as we say in the research. Like, that's kind of what you'd expect and almost what you'd hope for. Otherwise, maybe we did something wrong. But here's where stuff got a little bit more interesting. So when it comes to that visual authenticity, people found a big difference between how authentic the video was real versus a deepfake only in the celebrity condition. Whether they viewed our fake ordinary person video or the real ordinary person video made like literally not even 100th point difference. They got like the exact same score, relatively authentic on a 1 to 7 scale, whatever. But essentially, they were more able to feel that something was off, was inauthentic about the video where we faked Morgan Freeman than when they faked somebody they'd never seen. Right? Again, we can come up with like that. That sounds intuitive, right? I mean, we know what Morgan Freeman looks like and sounds like. But that's also a little bit alarming in that with regular people, I guess it's really easy to fake them, even using this. I mean, this is not like high budget technology. The deepfakes aren't even really that good. So maybe it's kind of alarming that if it's a deepfake of us, people can't tell if it's genuine or not, right? They don't have as many minutes logged of listening to our voice every 59th commercial that's on TV, right? So, yeah.
On those 2 lines, were those backwards or is visual authenticity scored low? Looks like the celebrity deepfake has higher authenticity than the authentic.
those are it does labeled backwards. Yes, it was the celebrity authentic that was accurate here. Thank you. And with the counter argument, it's a little different story, but the same kind of interaction effect. So what happens here is that if it's a fake video, people didn't really counter argue with it differently, whether it was a celebrity or an ordinary person. But if it's an authentic video, that's where they kind of really discriminated between what was going on, right? So again, they weren't really going to counter argue with real Morgan Freeman giving you the facts, but be telling me that something that's misleading. Again, in our particular video, it didn't contain any misinformation. None of it was actually misleading. You're saying other stuff, and part of what we just want to know how much are people sort of willing to take the arguments at face value or not. All right. So here we've got some obvious limitations. Very much a single shot study. One bit. Kind of suggests that people have an easier time. We didn't ask them specifically fake, but at least perceiving the inauthenticity of videos when they have some familiarity with the speaker. Good for those. Maybe harder to spoof celebs, but bad for the rest of us, maybe easier to spoof us, right? Users may rely on context mismatch cues more than tech cues and kind of how they're trying to figure out if some of the stuff is fake. That's why they sort of detect this differently when it's some random person as opposed to someone that has been associated with the particular issue at hand. Other interesting here is like this measure of visual authenticity wasn't directly related to message credibility. Now, maybe again, it's because the message was pretty credible. You're sort of talking about some of the evidence that the planet's getting warmer and some of the species that have died off over the past 100 years, right? So maybe the people are evaluating the message independently of video, but it was sort of interesting. So what's my research team doing next? Several kind of stuff that's related to this. So currently, we even ran 10 sessions today while I was in Boston. We're doing a study sort of examining a bunch of stuff in an Instagram feed, but some of it is how well people detect AI images, and this one we're actually specifically doing political posts and trying to see when people detect stuff as fake more often when it is attacking the side they prefer than when it supports the side they prefer. We sort of call it like a motivated reasoning approach, but in our case, it's motivated detection, right? Sort of apply more scrutiny to it, like just the same way we apply more scrutiny to an argument. If it's like against what we're saying, than if it supports what we're saying. We're wondering if that happens with AI detection as well. We've got with a really good measure of AI literacy, especially probably in the visual space. You try to see like what kinds of things people need to be familiar with to understand how this stuff goes on. Everything you've seen so far has either basically been wholly fake or wholly real, but that's not the sphere in which we're even living now, but especially going to be living, right? It's the same technologies that allow images, right? I mean, Photoshop has had some of this stuff for years. When you delete something. So I want to do a study there where people aren't necessarily told the image is wholly real or wholly fake, but do you think something's been tampered with this image? And then of course we'll be coding our open-ended response data until 2025 for sure. But that's kind of the stuff we're working on in this space, or questions you have, and that's pretty much got. So thank you for having me.
So we have about 5 minutes or so for some questions. So if you have a question, if you want to raise your hand. I'll provide the mic.
Thank you so much for another third year and bringing this program. I'm working in AI and multimedia technologies and interested in working in interdisciplinary research. My question that is how do you have an interdisciplinary grant team? How do your science team inform your project? And how will evolve team can be inspired from your project results?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think you sort of have the flow right in both those cases. So with the computer science folks specifically, we've got a computer science PhD student that's trying to build out a better version of that Google Chrome extension that shows the image provenance data, and then we're going to test it. So we want to run. I actually wanted to build a couple of different prototypes, and we want to see if there are different ways of presenting to like us, the users, information about where an image was made, how likely it is to be fake, if there's like an algorithm detection, all these different components in ways that people can understand it more accurately, and people apply that to the way they process the image. So they're building the prototypes, and we're going to test the prototypes. With the law team, yeah, I've shared some of my findings with them. They're really right now kind of looking more at sort of recourse for people who've had harms caused to them by deepfakes. So that doesn't necessarily, and they're also looking at like which party's liable and how liable are the software companies versus the users. So they were really interested in our findings, but I actually don't know if it's helping them too much. But thanks for asking.
We have time for one more question.
Yeah, actually, I have two questions. So firstly, I'm very interested in the partial true next step of the study. And actually, I have also encountered this. So in advertising, there is already a very long history of people photoshopping and making like your skin smoother, etc.
Your hair more voluminous,
Yeah.
the shampoo ads.
The difference when a human is doing this editing and when AI is doing the editing. And the second question is related to like the authenticity. So in images, I think people evaluate like real authenticity has very different dimensions. So there is like a fidelity element to it, and then there's also a narrative element to it. So in that deepfake video, even if it is a cartoon video, people may still consider it realistic if the narrative is coherent. So I also wonder how would you approach that different dimensions of reality?
I mean, I think those are both really good points. I think for the dimensions of authenticity, people, again, it's sort of familiarity comes into play, right? Some of it is like, is the narrative coherent itself, but also some of it is like, is the character saying something that would read, or doing it, or is the real person, is Morgan Freeman advocating for something that I think Morgan Freeman would advocate for, as opposed to, you know, something totally opposite, right? And that gets into the reality of how sometimes we see these deepfakes deployed, right? You have a fake video of someone doing something that they wouldn't do in real life because their opponent wants to make them look bad. And so I think that aspect of it is sort of really important, more than kind of just like technical fidelity and to look sort of like technically plausible. I may have already forgotten your first question. Sorry. Can you restate it real quick? Yeah.
So do you think there would be a difference when that kind of editing of the image is done by a person versus done by an artist?
I mean, if you're asking me if I think there's a difference in the result, just because I want to give humans sort of the credit for artistry and maybe doing things in a more varied way across applications than an algorithm might. If you're talking about the humans, I don't know. I mean, I think both the skill level is so high for human image editors and for what the algorithms can create now that I think both would be relatively difficult for the average person to discern, right? You would discern it from context clues. You discern it if you know what a shampoo hair shoot looks like, more than if you can tell some specific artifact in the image. It's just like, do you know that they touch up the hair? Do you know that the milk they're pouring on cereal is really glue so they can pour really slowly in the commercial? If you know that, you're going to think it's glue, but if you don't, you're like, whoa, right? It's more the recipient's kind of contextual clues.
All right, so you are invited to continue this conversation upstairs in Tom 209. We'll have free food and refreshments, and you can ask some more questions of Dr. Wojdynski. Also, if you are in need of credit for showing up, feel free to check in with our staff in the back. Give another hand to Dr. Wojdynski.